managed to kick up our Writing.Lab at ISTAC. I think there's an info, Brother Sharan.
Go ahead, Prof. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay.
The Writing Lab at ISTAC was born out of an aspiration to improve the writing skills of students and staff at ISTAC. And we have started since January 2021, very recent. Feedback from the ISTAC community showed a great desire to increase their writing skills with an expectation that this would help them in their studies and publications. So we strive to develop distinction in our services through adoption of global writing standards and feedback from students. And we are very happy that Brother Shahran is helping us to get students from all over the world. And we were told that students from over 40 countries have registered for this program today. And we hope with the active development and review coming from our students will consistently be conducted on our innovative services to foster an open and welcoming learning environment for all writers. So this is a necessary skills. The Writing Lab is at the moment is a free service for students which runs workshops, tutorials, one-on-one tutorials, support sessions to enhance academic writing and research skills. So the services are available specifically for postgraduate students of ISTAC, but we will be thinking as well to offer this to the world. And for the first trial, we are involving 8 professors at ISTAC, of which they will contribute their expertise through donating their wakaf time. So because everything is wakaf, so the participants will not have to pay, and the professors are also not taking any pay because this is run on wakaf. Brothers and sisters, today with us is a very distinguished scholar, which actually I do not have to introduce, but for new students, I guess we have to. The first speaker for our Writing Lab at ISTAC is Professor Emeritus Datuk Dr. Osman Bakar, who is a PhD scholar in Islamic philosophy. He has authored and edited 39 books and published numerous articles in the areas of history and philosophy of Islamic science, history of Islamic civilization, Islamic theology and philosophy, civilizational studies, comparative religion, religion and science, interreligious dialogue, and Islam in Southeast Asia. I have to limit myself in this introduction because we would like to hear directly from him on a talk entitled Epistemology, Theory and Practice. So without further ado, may I kindly invite Prof. Osman. So the floor is yours, Prof. Please. You have about 1 hour, Prof.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Datuk Sri Zaleha Kamaruddin, the moderator, Brother Shahran, and every one of you. First of all, before I proceed, can you hear me okay?
Okay, bro, we hear clearly.
Yes?
Yeah, very clear.
All right. Yeah, I want to make sure that what happens to one professor not realizing that in 2 hours of a lecture, this laptop was muted, no? only realized after that. It won't happen to me, inshallah.
Inshallah.
This is a nice PowerPoint.
Yes. All right. Yes, first of all, I want to express my appreciation to Professor Zaleha for taking this initiative, very, very important initiative in organizing this series of the ISTAC labs. So I volunteered. I said, okay, I can start the first one, and I requested to be given the opportunity to speak about epistemology because based on my experience of more than 40 years supervising, teaching, I think I can have some grasp of the what are the peculiar issues, that are faced by students especially. But I want to emphasize here that epistemology is a very, very important field of study. Now, you all have heard the term, and I'm sure also you have read about it in different contexts. But I still feel that I would like to speak about the topic. And my please don't get me wrong. I don't want you to get the impression that in this presentation, as a result of this 1 hour of presentation and then another hour of questions, yes, by the end of the day, then you'll be able to, in a sense, that your capacity, your capability of writing a good thesis, for example, is enhanced. No, I don't have that impression because I don't think with this one single lecture could be of much contribution. But I hope you do follow the series of lectures to be given by my other colleagues. But hopefully, after this program today, I would like to think that your mind has become, it has broadened. In other words, there are some issues that maybe has been clarified. So if I can achieve that, I'm quite happy. Yeah. In other words, come up with a mind that is able to visualize a bigger picture of the whole field of knowledge. So I call my talk today epistemology, theory and practice. All right. So what is epistemology? What is epistemology? Well, let's go to the etymological definition. Why important to start with etymological definition? Because etymological definition means that we are going to the original meaning of the word as used in the first language in which it was used. Actually, you know that this term originated from ancient Greek civilization, right? So the word epistemology itself is derived from a combination of two words. Episteme means knowledge, and the other one is logos, right? Now, logos is a word that has undergone a lot of changes in its form. Actually, in the ancient Greek culture, in the human mind, right? But now it is used in the sense of both. It was logos refers. Logos still maintains physiological meaning, as for example, the Christian logos, for example, and of course, for some people, the word has been secularized to give a purely human content to the word logos. But my own understanding of the original meaning is that logos is just referred to organized thought. Initially, it's divine organized thought. So, which means that combining the word knowledge plus organized thought, what we have, the original meaning of epistemology is thought or knowledge, right? So it's something like, all right, I ask, what are your thoughts on knowledge? So that question is an epistemological question, all right? So that is the etymological definition. Now next, yes. So what is the importance of etymological definition? What is the importance? Is it just because I just want to this? Yes, it is important, especially for some fields of study where you encounter concepts, original meaning, or etymological meaning would work because what was originally understood, what is currently understood, you can have some idea of the meaning to semantics. It is important to semantics, to the history of ideas, and even to conceptual definition, because the difference between not necessarily but often development in the semantic field. The semantic is something to do with meanings. Now but now, since our concern is more from the Islamic perspective, you want to talk about epistemology from the Islamic perspective. So I asked the question, so what is the significance of this etymological definition when viewed from the Islamic perspective? Which means, of course, in the Arabic context, because that was the original scholarly language of Islam, the Arabic. So to talk about etymological definition in the Islamic perspective would mean that we are going to that unique character about the Arabic language. We go to the triliteral roots, all right? The standard, we say fa'ain, lam, fa'ala. So that those three letters. So the three letters, of the words, and then from that you have so many different possibilities. You have fi'lun, you have fa'il, and so on. So this original meaning will tell us about the semantic field of a particular word in Arabic. And you know very well, semantic issues mean you're concerned about meaning, ma'na, right? The meaning. That's why you have for example, Professor Said Muhammad Naqib al-Atta's definition of knowledge, when he said knowledge is the arrival, husul, in the soul of the meaning, ma'na, of a thing or an object of knowledge. So what is knowledge? So he said, from the perspective of God, defined, or that object of knowledge. Viewed from the viewpoint of the soul of the individual, it will be the arrival of the soul at the meaning. See, the arrival of soul, which is wusul. So husul and wusul. And that's you can refer to Professor Al-Atta's definition of knowledge in Islam and secularism in the paper that he presented in the 1977 conference in Makkah. All right. So etymology is a very important integral component of epistemology. So epistemology is the broader concept, which includes etymology. So etymology and epistemology are not constitute different fields, also different semantic, but rather etymology is a particular aspect of epistemology. Now we go to the, I said, from etymological definition, we go to conceptual definition. Right? It happens that etymological definition is the same as conceptual definition, but in some cases that is not the case. So, for example, I said just now, etymological meaning, epistemology just means that some thoughts about knowledge. Right? But in the conceptual definition, it is more pronounced. You don't say just some thoughts about knowledge, say a theory of knowledge, right? Theory of knowledge. Let us not forget that in English, the word theory is derived from the Greek word theoria. And theoria in original Greek, it means vision, wawasan ilmu. Epistemology ialah wawasan ilmu. Epistemology is vision of knowledge. So some others vision of be narrower than some others, for example, or the theory of knowledge, the vision of knowledge in Islamic civilization is wider, is broader than the vision of knowledge in some other civilization, for example, right? So, but my point here is this, then because we cannot agree, we cannot agree on this conceptual definition of epistemology. The profound reasons for that, I don't want to go into that here, but what I can say is that the most general definition of epistemology on which we can agree is the theory of knowledge. Epistemology is theory of knowledge. But then, the moment we begin to give content to this theory, now they want to go into detail. Well, of course, what is theory? Then we start to differ from one another, to diverge in our opinions. So I think at the moment, in the present moment, epistemology, the modern Western epistemology is dominant. The Islamic one is marginalized, except among Muslims. Even among Muslims also, sometimes it is the Western definition that is dominant, right? But the Western definition or theory of knowledge is, this is one of the definition, and perhaps this is one of the most popular. The epistemology is the philosophical study of the nature of knowledge, of the origin and limits of human knowledge. These are the three fundamental issues dealt with in Western epistemology. Now, but what about Islam? Actually, I can say here, based on my own understanding, based on my own knowledge, Islamic theory of knowledge is far broader than the modern definition of epistemology. So there are many issues that are considered as under epistemology in Islam, but are not regarded as part of epistemology in the case of the Western perspective, right? And just to start, for example, on the question of definition, or even just because you just take, for example, the three aspects of epistemology treated by the West, right? It is the study of the nature of knowledge. So, what is the nature of knowledge? Now, Muslim epistemologists throughout the centuries have dealt with this issue. So they came up with the idea that as a kind of the general the understanding of that definition, which refers to the ta'arif. Yeah? Definition is of two types. One is what we call had definition in the form of al-had. It refers to the essential, what now is written in by some Muslims or some authorities in the modern language. They call it, had refers to the essential meaning of knowledge, whereas the other one is rasmun, that is a descriptive. If you refer to the very popular book, the Knowledge Triumphant by Franz Rosenthal, he gives hundreds and hundreds of definitions of knowledge, but actually those definitions refer not to had, but to rasmun. The rasmun is precisely, it means description or specification of distinctive characteristic of the object defined. In the case of knowledge, in other words, we can describe the characteristics of knowledge, but we cannot really define. We cannot be the real nature, yeah, or rather the nature of knowledge cannot really be make it definitive. We can't do that. But the consolation is that knowledge is self-evident truth. Right? So when the Prophet said that knowledge is light, ilmu nur, right? The knowledge is light, nur, all right? That is, in a sense, it is a description about knowledge, but what sort of light that against demands. In other words, we use a term, then that the usage of that term demands us to ask another question. We never satisfied. All right, you say it's no, but there are so many different forms of light. What is this light? Is it physical? Is it tangible? Is it or intangible? Is it spiritual? Well, we know, and this is something which Imam Al-Ghazali, for example, described in his tafsir on the Allah Nur Samawati wal Ard, God is the light. In his book Mishkatul Anwar, the niche of lights, he talks about the different types of light, from the physical, the lowest of the physical light, to the absolute light, referring to God Himself, who is a Nur. All right, but that's why Muslim epistemologists say we cannot define in the sense of had, because had requires us to enclose in that, to make the object define the definite, that we can't do, because we define things by using knowledge. Now we are asked to define knowledge in terms of by means of knowledge. That is not possible. Okay, so as far as the rasmun of knowledge, I say that there are so many things you can describe about knowledge. You say knowledge is useful. Knowledge is very knowledge is both human and divine. So you can describe in a different way, but that is not definite. This is not discussed. This is not. You don't have this kind of discussion in the case of Western epistemology, where they try to define anything. They think they have defined knowledge, but no, they have not really defined in the sense of ahad. Now, the other one is origin, question of origin, right? So, according to the Western definition, we have to talk about the origin of knowledge. But of course, Islam has its own perspective on the origin of knowledge. You know very well, of course. First of all, knowledge is both divine and human attribute. That's very, very, very important, right? In a sense, it is the foundation, one of the foundational premises or assumptions of Islamic epistemology. Knowledge is both a divine attribute and a human attribute. And how to explain between these two? You can find a lot of discussion in Islamic literature on this subject, the connection between the divine attribute of knowledge and the human attribute. Of course, in terms of origin, the ultimate origin of knowledge is God, who is the origin. Ultimate origin comes to the human soul, to the human mind. That is in so many different ways. So we had that principle, God and the different ways to the human mind. Now I want to go to the next slide. All right, question and epistemology. All right. I told you very important. I maintain that the most important field of knowledge, branch of knowledge in Islam is ilmu tawheed, science of the unity of God, about this branch of knowledge, then you know that you don't know about the others. Now, so why? My question is, why is the Quran interested in epistemology? Why? Well, important reason is the nature of Islam itself as a religion. I have often maintained in my lectures, in my talks, I've emphasized this point that Islam is the religion of knowledge par excellence. Religion of knowledge par excellence. In other words, it is essentially a religion of knowledge. So if Islam is essentially a religion of knowledge, how can it ignore epistemology? You cannot ignore. So the Quran has to be interested, because the Quran is about Islam. And related to this, of course, is its status. So if the Quran says that Islam is a religion of knowledge, then, and since the Quran is a book of guidance, then the Quran must have a lot to say about about itself as a guide in knowledge activities, about knowledge. So that's why you use more than 800 times the triliteral word Ain, Lam, Mim related to knowledge in the Quran. You can imagine, 800 and I don't know how many, but more than 800 occurrences in the Quran. That word, triliteral word, which gives rise to the concept of knowledge. Right? So I want to emphasize this. But then you ask, how often we really consult the Quran in this, as far as epistemology is concerned? I think not many, but I think we should do more. I think we should treat the Quran as a most important source of reference for our knowledge about epistemology. And of course, this is different from quoting, just referring to some ayat, some verses in the Quran that refers to knowledge. No, it's to have the whole picture of the Quran as a book of knowledge. Now, next question that I want to consider. All right. So, So is the Quran an important source or reference for epistemological ideas? The answer is yes. Very, very important, extremely important. And of course, it's not just a matter of theory. Right? The Quranic teachings on epistemology were put into practice. We put this implemented right from day one that those teachings were revealed. Now, the Quran created a community. And certainly, the Quran provides ideas for the purpose of creating a knowledge culture. It's very, very important. Islam has its own knowledge culture. Today, our Islamic knowledge culture is being impaired by so many negative factors. In the sense that the integral epistemology, the integral knowledge culture that was once the pride of Islam, then has become reduced and diminished. Only certain portion or certain segments of that original culture survives. But it is important for us to revive this, inshallah. Now, next, I just want to go to the principles of to talk about actually, what are the fundamental concepts in epistemology? This is very important. In the creation of Islamic epistemology, or rather, in the formulation of Islamic epistemology, this is an important idea. This is important agenda, categorization. In the creation of an integral knowledge culture, we must, in a sense that everything, the organization of knowledge must begin with categorization. Right? Because let's say you compare observation knowledge, all right? Knowledge is like an ocean of meaning. Knowledge is a vast ocean of meaning. Emily we say lautan tiada berpantai atau lautan tiada dasar. It is vast field because in a sense it is God's knowledge. Yeah. So how can we move forward? How can we progress? How can we create new branches of knowledge? We can't unless we do categorization. Knowledge has to be understood in terms of categories. So, for example, we say that reveal knowledge. So we take a segment or this divine knowledge covers everything, but for the purpose of analysis by the mind, we do that categorization so that we come up with that term. And in contrast, we come up with human knowledge. So we categorize that. In Islam, later on, we also call this, we have the religious sciences or the sciences of the Sharia, al-ulum al-shar'iyya. That is act of categorization. Right? In a sense, we make a part of the knowledge specific. So we have al-ulum al-aqliyya, al-ulum al-naqliyya. These are categorizations of knowledge. Ilmu fardu ain and fardu kifaya. There is categorization of knowledge. So if we study the world history of ideas, then we'll be able to see this process of categorization, because every civilization, even before Islam, to the Greeks, for example, the civilization of Aristotle and also they already categorized knowledge. So when Aristotle classified knowledge, that classification was based on certain categories of knowledge. All right. Logical knowledge. So the is very important. And this is a process that has not ended. It's an ongoing process. So today, the students, all right, you do your, you are writing thesis, you are doing your research to write articles, to write thesis, for example. You may have to categorize new, and you have to come up with new categories. The thing is, without categorization, the scholarship cannot go, cannot move forward. There is development in knowledge because category of the substance is called categorization. Now, definition. Next is definition. But you can only define after you have categorized. So when you have come up with many different terms related to categories of knowledge, then you define them. Yes, we say just now, there's a such thing as human knowledge. What is our definition? We need to define in order to distinguish it from divine knowledge. We have the term ulum al-aqliyah. We have the fact that we have these two terms means that we have some idea about their differences. So we have to define. Yeah. So my point is, as a principle, definition comes after categorization. Then after we have defined things, we know what we mean, then only we go to the next one is classification of data. So classification is the third most important concept in epistemology. Very, very fundamental question. Let's say, for example, the question of data. Because I always tell my student, when you write when to write about research methodology. Now, first of all, you have to answer the question: what are your data? Right? You are collecting data, but data also many different kinds. So you have to define those data. You have to categorize those data. You have to find them and then classify them. Let me give an example. In philosophy of science, in modern philosophy of science, they have you do this empirical data. Whether it's in natural science or in social science, they talk about empirical data. Data that are collected based on the sense perception, because this is the lowest level of data. Al-Ghazali used the word hissiyah. Hissiyah, the empirical data of the senses, right? Then he used the word, you have the rational data, aqliyat, and then you have the transmitted data, naqliyat, even you have the word taqlidat, at the end, the data that we derive, based on authority. Taqlid here, in the sense that taqlidat, the idea, the teaching that is derived from taqlid. In my chapter on Al-Ghazali, in my Tawhid and Science, and also that's the view of Ibn Arabi, taqlid in itself is not necessarily negative. Yeah, what we have to pay attention is not the taqlid, but what sort of taqlidat. In instance, in the ideas that are being received, are they true or not? Because taqlid can lead to both good things or bad things. But in terms of epistemology, the word taqlid is in a positive sense. It's based on authority. So that from this perspective, actually, the Quran is based on taqlid. We follow the Quran based on taqlid in the sense that based on the authority of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the authority of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Yeah. So we have to understand the epistemological context. Yeah? It's not necessarily, but we know that we are some of us are criticizing some people, not simply just based on the false authority. All right, next one. So now from concept we go to precepts. All right. In other words, these are just examples. It's not exhaustive. Yeah? I can't do this in such a short period of time, but we must know, all right, what are the principles, some of the important principles in epistemology, particularly now, of course, talking about from the Islamic perspective. This principle is the one-to-one correspondence between the knower, sometimes we refer to subject, the self that knows, yeah, the knower, and the known. The knower, alim, and the known, ma'lum, right? So you have the subject that knows, and the object that is known. One-to-one correspondence. Aristotle advanced this methodological principle. Only the like can know the like, meaning that the nature of the cognitive instrument in the knower that is operative will depend on the nature of the object that is being known. I think what I refer to as one-to-one correspondence between the knower and the known. The knower is an hierarchical, yeah. The instruments of knowledge, the cognitive organs in the human person, they are in a hierarchy. So that is also the nature of the objective world that you want to know. The objective world outside, for example, the creation. So it's ridiculous to know God through other than spiritual cognitive organ, because God is spiritual. In fact, is absolutely spiritual, absolute, compared to the relative spiritual, such as the angel. The angels are spiritual, but relative to the reality of God. So when the followers of Musa alayhi salam wanted to see God by means of the physical senses, I mean, they were doomed, okay? Because that is going against the nature of things. The point here, if we want to know the physical world, we will use our physical senses. If we want to know about the imaginal world, the world of the mind, the world of instance that can be imagined, all right? This has to be known through the imaginal or the imaginative faculty. And then if you want to know about the intellectual and spiritual world, then we have to know it through our intellect reason. And so again, also we have to know through the heart, for example. So that's what I mean by one-to-one correspondence. This means that once we know the nature of the objects of study, then we can decide what is our methodology. So our methodology must be in proportion, must be in uniformity, in harmony with the nature of the things they want to know. Of course, the particular subject, the object of study can be known by means of more than one method, by means more than the use of more cognitive instruments. That depends. But the point is, in order to do research on some particular subject, we have to ask the question: what is the objective nature of that subject? And then now, in order to study that, corresponding the what called cognitive organs that they are going to use. All right. Now the next one is question of very, very important principle of the unity of knowledge. This is basic to Islam because this is the corollary of the concept or the principle of unity of God, unity of the divine principle. Knowledge, real knowledge, two pieces of real knowledge cannot be in contradiction to each other. So guided by that confidence, by that certainty, knowledge cannot be opposed to each other. Right? Different branches of knowledge cannot be opposed. In fact, this idea of unity of knowledge plays a very important role in research in Islam. So we are look knowledge as just one vast ocean, interrelated. The idea is that the truth of things, knowledge of things, in one discipline when we want to do our research principle. So there cannot be contradiction between knowledge of religion and natural science. It cannot be conflict with social science. If we come to a contradiction, then we need to examine. But one is there cannot be. So if there is, then there's something wrong somewhere. And we will investigate that and correct the situation. And then, of course, the other one is, of course, the principle of the hierarchy of knowledge. The various branches of knowledge are regarded as branches of the same tree, single tree, hierarchy. Even just now, I talk about hierarchy of the cognitive organs, instruments in our soul, right? And there's hierarchy of that, but we could talk about hierarchy of the in term, what is meant by this idea of hierarchy is that sciences, different sciences, are not necessarily on the same level, or same footing, in same. One science can be viewed as more fundamental than another, or more important than another, of course, based on certain criteria. I have explained this concept in details in my book, Classification of Knowledge in Islam. These two principles, unity and hierarchy. In fact, my critique of the Islamization of knowledge that that started with the Makkah conference in the 1977, and for a generation, for 30 years, fine. I mean, but somehow then we got stuck. And I think, and when, let's say, 30 years after the Makkah conference, we are still talking of more of the same thing. But one important issue that was not tackled, that's not settled, is this four elemental structure of a science. Every science that deserves to be called science is comprised of four elements. The structure is made up of these four elements. First, subject matter. So, if we study psychology, what is the subject matter of psychology? So, that has to be examined first, in science. But obviously, the subject matter of Islamic psychology is much, much broader than the modern psychology. Parts of the subject matter have been taken out because from the Islamic perspective, psychology is the study of the soul, right? But when the soul is taken out of that and is replaced by something else, then we have to examine. So what is it in the traditional classical Muslim notion of soul has been taken out, has been relegated, has been marginalized? The point is, in other words, Islamization of psychology in particular and science in general have to look at the issue of subject matter, the mawdu, then that has to be done. Now the second one is foundational assumption. The contention here is that every field of knowledge, every science, whether religious, whether social or natural, is based upon certain assumptions. Without those assumptions, we cannot proceed with that science. So every science has done. So that's why the first generation of people who try to formulate, to explain the new science created, they have to tell what were the assumptions. Yeah. So whether it's in physics, biology, or astronomy, or sociology, and so on. Now, Islamization, therefore, has to address. All right. Are these assumptions correct? Are these assumptions sufficient or not? I want to share with you my experience in 2007. I was part of a group of scholars representing the different religions. Only 7 of us. We had a 1 week, brainstorming in Japan. In Japan, our job simple, to examine the foundational assumptions of modern science. We were interested to find out how many of these assumptions are still valid, and we found out that more than half are no longer valid in the light of new advancements in knowledge. Another portion still valid. Another portion needs to be revised. Not invalid, but needs to be reformulated. This is very, very important aspect, all right? Because we have been studying in that branch of knowledge without questioning the foundation on which that science is based. Yeah? It's as if that we are staying in a house, all right? For 50 years, we stayed in the house. We never look at the foundation of the house, whether it is is this still strong or still already ravaged by termites and so on. We have to examine. Of course, this is the work of epistemologists. The work of epistemology is and the other one, of course, is methodology. Very important principle in Islamic epistemology is that there's no single methodology that is applicable to every science. Different sciences employ different methodology. So if you're wrong to impose a uniform methodology on all disciplines, it's going against the nature of epistemology. This is very important. All right. It is the West. It is the modern West that uniformizes this. See? You must use the scientific method. The term is scientific method. If you don't use the scientific method according to their definition, according to their characterization, then it's not valid. That's not valid. But that's not the case. Religious sciences, right? Theology needs different methods. Mathematics also needs its own method. Sociology needs its method. The study of cognitive intelligence needs its own method. Medicine, its own methods. Right? So, the nature of this will determine what is the appropriate methodology. And of course, the fourth element is the end. What is the objective of this study? Yeah? So what is the objective of sociology? What is the objective of medicine? What is the objective of physics? Every branch of science has its own epistemological goal, the immediate goal. Of course, the longer term goal, the general goal is knowledge is useful to society. So it's not enough to say that every science, the aim is to serve society. Of course, it's to serve society, but the more epistemological aim, which is the one that's nearer to mine, in other words, what does that particular science hope to achieve, to prove? What does it want to prove and to show? Understand that? What body of truth does that science want to establish? I think this is a very important set in epistemology. Well, probably I just want to go to the, what's the time now? I'm
Now now is 3:56, Prof.
Yeah, you give me
I think we
5
can
minutes
take
or
a
so.
video, yeah.
5 or
Yeah.
10 minutes. Now,
Yeah.
yes. All right. Talking about all this, I mean, for what? I mean, that's why I have one heading here, applied epistemology. So, of course, we must understand for this the theoretical part of this epistemology, the theory, but now we have to apply that. Yeah. And I can only again mention here some examples. Each own my own area of specialization, for example, different criteria of classification. Epistemology is applied to the study of classification of knowledge. And in my book, Classification of Knowledge in Islam, would show clearly in what way epistemology has been applied to that subject of study. And it is important to know, of course, then there are different criteria of classification resulting in different classification, because empirically we know very well that Islamic civilization we encounter different classification. So rather than saying that these people are contradictory to each other, no, they are not. It's just that they were using different criteria for different purpose. What I did in my book, Classification of Knowledge in Islam, I consider three major criteria, right? The ontological criteria, the methodological criteria, and the ethical criteria, viewed from the viewpoint of ethics. And I give an example to divide science, to classify science and knowledge into ilmu fardu ain and fardu kifayah. That is based on ethical criteria. Right? Now, I want to just the few minutes of few minutes that I have my slides, applying epistemology to thesis writing, to article writing. I just want to show you how relevant the Quran is, even on this aspect. So I just want to talk about the significance of Al-Fatiha for epistemology in general and thesis writing in particular. For example, the importance of definition. Importance of definition. Where is it? Where is it that you have this concept of definition in Surah Al-Fatiha, the opening chapter of the definition? Well, the concept of Siratul Mustaqim, the straight path. The straight path, of course, is a categorization. First of all, it is categorization. The Quran categorizes a path which it calls the straight path. But not only categorized in the Surah Al-Fatiha, but it was also defined. Defined both in both senses, had and rasm. In the sense that the essence of the Siratul Mustaqim was defined. And then the characteristics of that Siratul Mustaqim also defined. Now, that part of the definition which conforms to the essential definition is Ihdina Siratal Mustaqim. I'm sorry, no, just before that is Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Two things, all right? Our commitment, we commit ourselves that we want to serve, we want to worship Allah alone, and we want to seek help from Him alone. So I'm saying definition of Siratul Mustaqim is the worship of one God. That is that path. The straight path is the path in which the worship of God alone is performed. I verified that by going to all the other places in the Quran where the word Siratul Mustaqim is mentioned, and by consulting all the other verses on that, it confirms that. It confirms that essential definition, right? Then, in terms of the rasm, the description, well, it explains that. What is Siratul Mustaqim? Siratul Ladzina an'amta alayhim ghayril maghdubi alayhim waladdallin. So, there you have what is being affirmed as Siratul Mustaqim and what is negated of Siratul Mustaqim. What is affirmed of Siratul Mustaqim is the path on those on blessings are given. Yeah. Siratul Ladzina an'amta alayhim ghayril maghdubi alayhim waladdallin. And the one the ghayril maghdubi alayhim waladdallin, that one you have the what is negated of Siratul Mustaqim. This is a very, very beautiful epistemological idea. So in other words, the Quran provides us a model here. Yeah? And do it here in Surah Fatiha. The mother the mother of the book. All right. So that's the first thing from there, from Al-Fatiha. Now the other one is of course is classification. You have that classification. All right. You have the classification because then based on the path of those who are who have been granted comfort with the blessings and ni'mah, and those who are who have deviated, and those are the other one whose rest, God's rest is on them. So in other words, it provides ideas there. The other one is, of course, is about. It is said that Al-Fatiha is the summary of the Quran. All right, the summary of the Quran. What you call in writing thesis, you write abstract, you write. What is the abstract? Abstract is supposed to be that concise summary of your thesis. Right? Often I find that the abstract sometimes given by some students do not really capture the whole of the thesis. In other words, yeah. This you can imagine if I say the Fatiha is the summary of the whole Quran, the essential summary. The whole Quran from Surah Al-Baqarah until chapter 114, yeah, that is the whole of the Quran. What sort of summary do you have? Let's say the instruction to you in 7 sentences. Right? In 7 sentences, will you get the same 7 sentences at Al-Fatiha? No, only God. God, the author, God, from whom the Quran comes, He knows. So He summarized in the most perfect manner. So that, in the sense that the whole of the Quran is contained in the Fatiha. All right, and just to into the significance. So, and then the analysis and thesis. Analysis and synthesis is a very two important facets of our mind. So in a thesis, we need both analysis and synthesis in sense that basically synthesis occurs twice, one in the abstract and the other in the conclusion. All right. In a sense, we are synthesizing. Yeah? After having written the thesis, now we want to write an abstract. It's basically how to come up with a synthetical viewpoint, yeah? In the sense that your whole thesis is summarized in the synthesis. The synthesis has captured the most important things that you want to say. Nothing is omitted. But that demands an art. It's an art. Right? That is an art of doing synthesis. You cannot achieve synthesis unless you are able to to combine your ideas into more inclusive concepts, because right? But synthesis, we have to come up with inclusive terminology, inclusive concepts that capture the details. So this art, of course, is an art that we improve through practice, right? So the more often we write, the better we do in doing analysis and synthesis. But one, it is very important dimension of thesis writing. I mentioned that because I'm telling you, many students have not done well in writing their abstract and in conclusion. I'm talking about the last conclusion. Some people may do conclusions in the each chapter. There's their own conclusion, reproducing what you have written differently. But what I would call here creative conclusion. Creative, right? Yes, it is a form of summarizing. You write 7 chapters. Now you want to capture again what are your findings in different chapters. But out of those, you have to come with something creative also. To be creative here means to be able to see what is the significance of your finding, the significance of your conclusion. First of all, to your own field of study, because that is the first important thing. What do people, your colleagues in in the same field, get to benefit from this? What further research can be of what has been achieved in your field. This is a very, very important thing. That's why in the beginning already, when you do your thesis proposal, for example, as the background, the general, the background, you should already have you should be doing some survey of the what has been achieved in the same field of study. Without that knowledge, you have an issue, because thesis is about an issue. You come up with a topic based on the issue in which you are interested, but that issue has to be contextualized, has to be viewed in the context of the discipline, academic discipline, that you have. Of course, you should also observe ethics of knowledge, which is part of epistemology here. Yeah? Ethics of knowledge. I want to advise or to give advice to our younger students, which is against the teaching of the Quran. What I understand what the Quran says, bil haq. To be objective, first of all, means to be sincere. To be sincere and to be truthful. So, what do you mean being objective in the Islamic context? It means to be sincere, ikhlas, and to be truthful. So, we are dedicated to the truth. By the end of your study, you have served this purpose. Now, The other one, of course, is to do epistemological justice. You should do justice to the subject you study, or to authors you have cited in your works. All right. So when we choose a particular topic for our thesis, please bear this in mind. Please ask yourself: am I doing justice to the subject, to the topic that I've chosen now? Very that alone in 3 years. So this epistemological justice is important, all right? So that kind of ability, that sense of justice in terms of paraphrasing an author and quoting an author. I'm saying that quotation is better, superior to paraphrasing. I find that sometimes I check this person, this candidate, paraphrase an author. But the paraphrase is not what the author meant. All right. So we are not doing justice to the author. So we are on the safer side if we quote what that author, what that scholar said. That scholars, the author's own words. We don't consider that quotation. Rather than paraphrasing, putting the name of the book and the year published, but actually it's not what the author meant. One is very important. Avoiding useless knowledge. You should learn to know what is useless knowledge, and to avoid plagiarism. Now you have the means. We have the technical means to check whether you are doing plagiarism or not. So, okay, Prof, thank you very much. Roughly what I wanted to say, I hope that I have raised certain epistemological issues that will lead you, some of you, to give a deep thought reflection. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Osman, for the enlightening lecture on epistemology, and not just theory but practice of it in the theoretical framework of coming and writing the thesis, especially PhD thesis. We value your contribution in this, but I do have my fear that there are some participants who enter the room last minute. Maybe they did not get the whole crux of the lecture except the tail of the lecture. So what I could say is just like it seems like patch knowledge for those who came in late. Yeah. Well, we have about 15 minutes left for question and answers. We could not entertain all, but I guess those questions in the chat will be entertained, and we try to sift some of the questions so that Prof, you can answer them. There are a few questions. If I can hand over to Brother Shahran, because I could not see the questions, Brother Shahran.
Okay, Prof.
Yeah. Yes, thank you, Brother Shahran.
Okay,
yes.
Prof. The first one from Brother Kustan from Bogor. How should we determine which textual sources that we should cite in the form of a paraphrase, and which one that we should quote directly? Paraphrase may simply a bit different meaning to our readers.
Well, I'm not saying that it is haram to paraphrase. No, by means continue. But as I said, it depends on our ability, our grasp of what the author has said. If you think that I'm what my advice is that if I said certainly to quote is better, right? Wherever it is appropriate to do the quotation is better, especially on something, on an issue which may be easily be misunderstood, to avoid misunderstanding, to avoid that we are doing injustice. My point is doing injustice to author. This is the spirit we learn from ilmu hadith, the hadith, the isnad. You see, it's very important that we do not introduce words, that was not used by the original speaker. So the science of hadith methodology is very important as a guide. All right, we quote, right? But if we think that, as long as you can avoid that, by all means, sometimes, that you just want to paraphrase, So
Okay,
hello?
Prof. Yeah. Then
a little bit start there. Okay, Brother Sharat.
The connection here is not stable. Doesn't look.
The connection is not stable as well on my side.
Yeah.
But Prof, again, a follow-up of the paraphrasing. If you are proposing that quotation are made, but there's also a regulation, Prof. I guess most of the universities, they have regulations in quotation, in using quotation. I guess it's not more than 30% because they run through some softwares to ensure that certain number of percentage of quotations. So what is your take on that, Prof?
Then there's no point, in other words, quotations are minimal where necessary. So we still observe the 30% limitation. To have 30% is already a lot. It's already a lot to quote. But rather than not disallowing altogether, because I heard in some places they disallow that altogether. Just no, I don't agree with that. I mean, especially in the case of Islamic studies, in the case of the social sciences, it's different than the technical subject, natural sciences. I mean, sometimes we need to quote. We need to do the full quotation.
Yeah.
Especially
there's one important question here from Del Inspiron to everyone. Assalamualaikum, Prof. Osman. Can a psychological knowledge apply to Islamic knowledge? Because in most cases, it contradicts Islamic teaching.
Can psychological knowledge?
Can a psychological knowledge apply Islamic knowledge? Because in most cases, it contradicts Islamic teaching.
No. I have to do some critical analysis of your question.
Okay? This question is from a brother.
Yeah, because now I do not take as just take it just like that. When you use the term psychological knowledge, and then you use Islamic knowledge. No, the categorization is wrong. I think the categorization Islamic knowledge is wrong, and a lot of Muslims doing this wrong thing. There is no such thing as Islamic knowledge and un-Islamic knowledge. All knowledge, all true knowledge is Islamic. And that's why we don't use the word adjective Islamic knowledge. Right? Knowledge cannot be false. Knowledge is something that is true. By some other names, not knowledge. False.
Internet is very unstable.
So the differentiation between psychological knowledge and Islamic knowledge is not correct. But I know what you mean. You want to know whether we can make use of psychological knowledge, which I assume to be true knowledge. Yes, because psychological knowledge in psychology, in sociology, in politics, in physics, and so on, if they are true, then they affirm the truth of Tawheed, the unity of divine principle. They affirm the truth of Islam, and therefore it is Islamic. Yeah. So therefore,
another question, Prof. From Imam Kanafi. In Arabic, there are many terms about knowledge. So he gave an example of al-ilmu, al-ma'rifa, al-hikmah, al-hakikat. Can you please explain to me or to all the participants that terms from the perspective of Western epistemology?
These are fundamental issues in epistemology that have been addressed by many scholars. I mentioned already Professor Said Muhammad Nakil Atas. I can mention some of Said Hossein Nasr, Ismail Faruqi, and others, Al-Rahman Malik Badri. All these have done this, have addressed this. Now, of course, if you are a linguist, if you want to do research in more detail, for example, what is the difference between ilm and ma'rifah? Yes, you can do that. You see context, how Islamic literature, yeah? So if you read, for example, of the Arabic, the lanes of Edward Lane's Arabic English lexicon, for example, he will produce the evidence from the whole literature since throughout the history of Islam. Why is it different? What is the subtle difference? Why is the subtle difference between ilm and ma'rifah? There is a difference, but very subtle. It's just like in Malay, in Bahasa Melayu, there is a difference, subtle difference between tahu dan kenal. You understand? Yeah? You may tahu somebody, but you don't kenal that person. You didn't kenal, yeah? Kenal tahu. So something like that. The analogy of ilm and ma'rifah is the difference between tahu dan kenal.
There's one more question.
So we have to, in other words, my point is, Prof, my point is,
yeah,
it doesn't mean that all those categories have been understood correctly. And this is where today our role. If you want to study, all right? So, for example, this term, or the al-ulum al-naqliyah. That we must study. You use the term, but we don't really analyze the concept. What is really the concept of the ulum al-aqliyah or ulum al-naqliyah? We need to examine this. We can look at our history of ideas and try to see where something has gone wrong, something like has happened or not. Okay.
There's one question, Prof, from Brother Tahir Ahmad. I am a mathematician. Is Euclidean and non-Euclidean geometry are two pieces of knowledge that contradict to each other?
Euclidean
and
non-Euclidean. Yeah. This is my old friend Zahra. He's a mathematician. Well, I mentioned in my article on this Omar Khayyam's critique of the Euclidean geometry. In fact, there I showed he went further. He talked about system geometry. It's not, first of all, as a matter of principle, there is no contradiction between Euclidean geometry and non-Euclidean geometry. The it is a possibility, all right? Because there have also been some Muslim philosophers of science who mention or who argue that the Euclidean geometry corresponds to the ordinary world of our perception, our physical world. Just as we have a system of logic that corresponds to our ordinary experience. All right. The same thing happens to geometry. It is possible to think of geometric systems in the world beyond the physical world of other dimension. But for our purpose, at the elementary level, physics, for example, also, so we accept this. But philosophers have also looked at the limitation. What are the limitations of the Euclidean mathematics, Euclidean geometry? My answer to the question is not necessarily in contradiction, unless we can pinpoint to some particular elements and something in particular that we can show that it is contradictory to Islamic science, to Islamic mathematics, more importantly to Islamic mathematics.
Prof, there's so many questions coming in, Prof. I'm not quite sure whether we could entertain all. Perhaps this is all the more reason to have part 2 of the epistemology. But I think we could entertain one last question before we end at 4:30 from Fadil. Prof, you mentioned that the unity of knowledge means that no two knowledges can contradict each other, if I understand correctly. How do we apply this to the apparent divergence between Newtonian and quantum physics, particularly with regards to the motion of matter? That's all, Prof, the question.
Yeah, thank you. The question is related to the question on the previous question on the Euclid, right?
Yeah.
As I said, based on our world of experience. Now, Newtonian physics is based on so many assumptions. Going back to the concept of fundamental assumptions in modern science, Newtonian physics is true in the context of certain based on those assumptions. Yeah, so it's based on our the experience of our ordinary perception, experience in the how. First of all, for example, Newtonian physics is based on the assumption that we are on a stationary planet. Okay? We are studying motions of physical law based on the assumption that the Earth is not moving. That is the assumption. But quantum physics is different. Yeah? Quantum physics is based on the assumption that everything is in motion. We know very well the Earth is moving, revolving around the sun. All right. And not only that, while revolving around the sun, it also rotates around its own axis. You have double motion. Yeah. It's something like we are riding on a train. We would be observing things differently as the train is moving compared to we observe by staying on this spot. So it's not that the quantum physics is wrong. No, but quantum physics has to be understood in a different context. In different context, we have so that's why quite differently from some people in the West who discarded Newtonian physics in favor of quantum physics. Islamic philosophers would say that both are true, but they have different the parameters for each physics different, the context is different, the assumptions are correct. I don't want to go into detail on that. I mean, we have to go into the question. For example, the question, if I say, all right, now I have here, I hold my phone here. I say the phone is in a solid state. Nobody can deny this. All right? This phone is in a solid. It's a solid. It is a solid. It is not liquid. It is not gas. It is solid. All right. So if somebody who said that, it will be wrong. But then if a physicist, a quantum physicist, say no. I said instead of seeing a solid, I can see the atoms of your phone are now dancing. Around. He's not wrong. Also, yeah, he's not wrong. But they are making the statements from different viewpoints. So this phone is both a solid and not solid. It is static as well as moving. It's dynamic in a dynamic state. You have to look now from which perspective that we are making our statement. Okay. That's what Professor.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Prof. Osman, for answering all those questions. Although there is a queue of questions actually, because you have opened a Pandora box of questions for our younger scholars. Inshallah, perhaps I will follow up with Prof for part 2, because it seems that those in the social sciences are also interested, but interested in applying epistemology with social sciences instead of hard sciences. We've been entertaining questions from mathematicians, from the perspective of physics, basically hard sciences. But what we'll do, we hope all our younger scholars would be patient. We will try to arrange for some more along the same line, Prof, because we don't want to cut and paste the knowledge if the depth is not there. So at least there is a certain breadth and depth of the topic for them to really understand. So that's it. So thank you very much. We really appreciate your contribution, Prof. And in fact, we are taking in more suggestions and proposals from our participants today, just for this particular topic, so that we could get Prof. Osman to clarify further on areas that has been causing some grey areas. I would say grey areas for them, not grey areas for Prof. Osman, grey areas for them, so that they could apply that in their thesis. So I think for those doing PhD, is more on like guiding hand for them. For the undergraduates, perhaps it's an exposure. For those doing masters, is trying to understand the issue, as Prof mentioned, that this is the elementary perspective for them as well. So that's it. So we hope, we would like to thank everybody for their time in following this 1.5 hours of lecture by Prof. Osman Bakar. We hope to hear more from him from the Writing.Lab at ISTAC. So inshallah, we will try to get as many as possible to join us in our next part 2 of epistemology. We hope to get the time from Prof. Osman. So before I end, I would like to say thank you, especially to Brother Shahran, who has been helping me technically in this. Though this is the first time we're having this, I guess we hope to get more number of students to come in. Please spread the word and share, because it is basically free, but that doesn't mean that it is not useful, because some people say if it's free, then therefore it's not good. No, these are series of lectures by renowned scholars. So the first batch would be 8 professors who are in the field more than 30 years. For Prof For example, for Prof. Osman, this is his 40th year, so it's good to share with him his knowledge, and we hope to see you all soon. So thank you very much, everybody. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi